What's up, y'all? I'm Big Charles, and today I'm here to holla at the old heads and the unks of this community from my platform. But first, let me say my apologies for not having any videos in a minute. I had COVID, thought I was gonna die, but we got it under control now. That is indeed why my voice is extra crispy in this here video production today. And just a little housekeeping real quick. Thank y'all so much for the insane support and growth on the channel. We're just about halfway to 100 subs, so please, if you're liking the content, just give that there subscribe button a nice gentle caress for me. Alright, big dog? Thanks, guys. It means the world. Oh, and one last bit of housekeeping. I do have a Night Rain test key. We'll be covering the network test. I'm super excited. Not sure if I'll be able to actually record my own footage or not, but I will cover my thoughts either way on the channel. So again, hit that sub button if you want to catch that. On that note, with all the hype and opinions around Night Rain kind of bubbling up to the surface, we got Elden Ring PvP doomerism at its most pervasive I've seen yet. I want to be a willful contrarian here and simultaneously kind of expand the horizons of the channel. And I want to take a look back to a very different type of game by a very different Fromsoftware. And of course I'm talking about that old Souls vibe, brother. Now, that can be something that's a little hard to quantify, but much like U.S. Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart in the 1964 case Jacob Ellis v. Ohio, I know it when I see it. And what you're seeing on screen right now, that's it. If somehow you don't know it when you see it, I'm gonna break it down today for all you young bucks, all you spring chickens, you little turkey toms out there, alright? I'm gonna just grab a coffee real quick and we can get down to brass tacks. So, Old Souls is a term I use informally, colloquially even, to describe the characteristics shared between Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2, and to an extent Bloodborne. Bloodborne's interesting in that it's kind of both the last Old Souls game as well as the blueprint for Neo Souls games, as I call them. As I believe it was kind of during that game's development that Fromsoftware's most significant paradigm shifts in design philosophy occurred, but that's probably grounds enough for its own video. So anyway, why, you may ask, do I feel a need to delineate a boundary within the Soulsborne Kiro Ring quote-unquote series? Well, for one, Soulsborne Kiro Ring sounds fucking stupid. And two, it doesn't make very good sense when going from Demon Souls to Sekiro would likely give an average person whiplash, and considering Dark Souls' subdued and obtuse, often quiet, tense, exploration-driven gameplay loop and meditatively jank combat to be somehow the same genre as Elden Ring's high-flying, high-octane anime showdowns with a 14-foot runback from the site of grace that you rode your horse past the entirety of the combat encounters in the level to get to, just feels incredibly reductive of how different these games are. So yeah, I'm coining Old Souls and Neo Souls. I've seen some say classic From versus new From, like new metal, things like that online, but I don't really feel like bringing Armored Core into this, so for my intents and purposes on this channel, it's Old Souls and Neo Souls. Not that Neo. So, that being said, what is that old Souls vibe? Why is it so unique and special? What keeps old heads like myself and my friends returning to these decade-plus old games when there's later and, on paper, greater iterations available? I think, to me, this question isn't ever going to be fully answerable. It'll always be a kinda if you know sort of thing, a vibe, if you will. This Phantom here, by the way, is my buddy Benzodrex, aka Gord. He'll be featuring as a guest throughout this video. He's a fellow Old Souls enjoyer. But yeah, we were playing some DS2 together the other night and just having such a blast in a way we haven't had in Elden Ring in such a long time. Like, I wish I recorded the voice call while we were playing, but I'm hopeful it's pretty apparent just from, what's going on screen that there was some serious laughs being had. And I think that kind of speaks to the essence of the vibe I'm talking about. These old Souls games have a really polarized aura to them. On the one hand, they can be some of the most somber, surreal, and meditative experiences available in gaming. But on the other hand, they often cross the line into hilarious absurdity and pure slapstick comedy, sometimes going so far this direction that it wraps back around on itself, and the harrowing silence and uncanny NPC expressions can bring a giggle out of you, or a normally hilarious death can be enough to end a session for the night just because it became a little too brutal and real to bear that run back through the gauntlet and pick up your souls again. At their heart, these games are simply unceremonious and decidedly crude in how they treat you and how you're expected to treat them. And I think for me, at the heart of this balancing act between absurdity and severity is the often strange and truly unapologetic design choices made in the development of these early Souls games, including the obscure online mechanics, hilariously high commitment animations leading to generally unintuitive punishment of what we would think of as normal play patterns, a lack of direction, and an even greater lack of objective clarity. Like, I've finished Dark Souls 2 many times, including a Soul Level 1 run, and I'm still not really sure what my character accomplished in the context and scope of the game. Maybe I'm just an illiterate hillbilly, but even if so, I find that type of obscurity incredibly alluring and charming, and there's a lot more to it. The feeling of advancing your mechanical skills in these old Souls games feels much less akin to perfecting timing and reflexes like how a game like Elden Ring or DS3 feels, and much more like refining your grasp on some sort of ancient alchemical art where tactics, knowledge, discipline, and positioning come together to create the ambrosia of old Souls game sense. The truly punishing nature of the design also makes it so you're never quite comfortable, no matter how well you're performing. You're a couple slip-ups from doing the whole level over again, with no Steak America and rarely a convenient bonfire to be had. And that's not to say that I dislike these quality of life elements in the Neo Souls games. I think they're absolutely necessary concessions to make the incredibly complex combo fest boss stylings of the newer games playable, let alone enjoyable. But there's a charm to the fact that in old Souls, the level is the real challenge, and the pressure of the boss fight isn't necessarily cultivated by the boss being some insurmountable obstacle or even particularly difficult, some exceptions aside. But instead, the pressure and impact of the encounter is provided by the fact that if you aren't locked in and you choke up the fight, you're going to have to avoid tilting and make a long, unforgiving run back in as cool and collected of a manner possible. Old Souls just demands an entirely different level and type of mental game from the player. Like, let's take two iconic Old Souls bosses, for example here. Smelter Demon and Tower Knight, from DS2 and Demon Souls, respectively. Smelter Demon is well known as an imposing and tough boss with an incredibly punishing run back, probably the most maligned feature of the boss. But I want to posit that without that run back, the boss would lose an incredible amount of the X factor that makes him so intimidating and impactful in the first place. To put it in perspective, Smelter Demon only has 6 distinct attacks, only one of which I would consider to even require the learning of the timing to dodge it consistently. The rest are pretty visually intuitive. And he has a mechanic where he applies damage over time to players in proximity in his second phase. If he had a no stress bonfire placed right outside the boss room, allowing the player to make free attempts on him whenever they like with no pressure or time investment, even the most mediocre players would have the boss down in a couple of attempts. The second phase mechanic wouldn't have much shock or panic value with little on the line, and he would ultimately be a far less impactful and memorable roadblock in a tough area. Tower Knight follows a very similar design philosophy, where his unique mechanics and imposing appearance wouldn't have nearly the same impact without the imminent and daunting threat of a long trek through a tough level backing them up. The first time a player successfully crosses the Lord's path and enters the fog gate to Tower Knight, the shock value and tension of his size and seemingly impenetrable defenses, not to mention being flanked on both sides by ranged assailants, is palpable. You are immediately struck with flashbacks of the journey you just made, being burned alive by a dragon, shot by archers, fighting knights, and you're struck with the fear of doing it again. This inspires a serious time to lock in moment. And though often players will fall in this first encounter as they fumble with strategies to try and overcome the mechanics and situation of this fight, once you finally bring him down by that Achilles heel and wail on his head for massive damage, you feel incredibly relieved. That's how I'm gonna do this. I would go so far as to say this feeling can be just as, if not more, rewarding and interesting to attain than the feeling of memorizing the dodge patterns of excessively long combos or the timings of wildly delayed swings. Not to say it's better per se, but it's equally, if not more, impactful and worthwhile to the experience of Souls. It's fundamental to it, really, and is something I do find the Neo Souls games to be lacking. Now, some detractors will say that this is poor boss design, that bosses should stand on their own, quote unquote. But it's simply how bosses were designed in the old Souls school of thought, at least at their best. The level was part of the boss's challenge. Dying to the boss represented a splash of cold water in the face, a complete reset where you now had to further hone your strategy of getting back through the level unscathed in order to fight the boss at full strength. Rushing back, getting frustrated or reckless, are sins that will often be met with cruel punishment and further frustration. Again, Old Souls just required a different sort of mental game from players that I highly value in my challenging dark fantasy experience. Old Souls difficulty is derived from an ever-increasing burden on the player's mental stack, and that difficulty demands that it is met with a stoic and careful demeanor. Sure, it's important to stay calm in the Neo Souls games as well, But that isn't exactly the focal point of the challenge like it used to be. In Old Souls, your management of your mental state and how you process relevant situational information is everything that you live and die by. And there's a real appeal there for certain kinds of players, such as myself. These games aren't about being the fastest or the most skilled on the sticks. They're about being knowledgeable and cool, composed, resilient, and willing to have that knowledge, composure, and resilience tested time and again. Now, that's all excellent, of course. Great video essay, Charles. But it wouldn't be a big Charles vid without talking about the PvP. And let me just say, if you've only ever played Elden Ring PvP, you don't know nothing about this. All Elden Ring players know is press L2, charge their phone, eat hot chip, summon blues, and die to a random mob. Man, if you haven't, you gotta try it in Old Souls. In many ways, invasions are easier for the invaders with solo host eligibility and all that. But at the same time, the actual combat is so insanely different from what Neo Souls has conditioned us to expect and do. The animations are highly committed and punishable. Positioning is everything, and the melee elements feel highly emphasized in a really scrappy and brutal way. Much like in the PvE, these battles come down just as much to your mental game as they do your reflexes or raw skills. How well do you understand the reach matchup? How well do you manage space? How quickly can you adapt to latency? Do you know about and understand how to effectively use relevant tech in the lock-on system to position yourself where you want to be? Backstabs, guard breaks, combos, pseudos, roll catching. I mean, it's all there, but unlike Elden Ring, stamina is a real resource, and it's scarce. Combat actions do not come cheap in terms of their stamina cost or recovery times in Old Souls, so you need to be able to manage the fight and make split-second decisions about how to use that stamina, space, and time wisely. These fights don't feel like epic duels or war crimes on a massive scale like they do in Elden Ring. They feel dirty, human, tooth and nail. They feel like randomly assaulting a person struggling through the same muck that you just dragged yourself through. The both of you desperately grappling to gain the upper hand until one of you is able to just push the other's head down long enough till it goes still, finish the fight. You both get back to your business. The invasions in Old Souls feel hungry, dangerous, feral, and extremely impactful, both for the tooth and nail, comparatively grounded mechanical reasons, as well as for many of the same reasons I described when talking about Smelter Demon and Tower Knight. There's something precious on the line. The host's time, souls, and human form. The rewards for victory and consequences of defeat are not arbitrary or empty in Old Souls. These ain't no rune arcs. You are, in theory, invading to restore your own human form, a sizable buff, by siphoning it from another player's body. And they have everything to lose, not only said human form, but also any souls they have on the ground, and often of most severe importance, the time they've spent diligently progressing the level thus far. Not to mention world tendency and demon souls, but that's too in the weeds for this video, I think. Point being, these fights have some weight to them, and the mechanics only further the desperate and brutal feel of the simple yet deep melee-centric combat. If you can't tell, I really passionately love the approach to combat and game design taken in Old Souls. They're truly meditations on the fundamentals of this distinct flavor of low, dark fantasy action RPG combat. And there's a certain je ne sais quoi here that is simply lacking for me in the Neo Souls entries. I'm missing gravity and grit, a fear and hunger, a brutal reality in the encounters that has been gradually replaced with more empty and casualized, user-friendly mechanics. The point of this video isn't to say that Old Souls is better or that I don't like Neo Souls, but there's a part of me that is really sad to see these games misunderstood and misrepresented in the community. And it's equally disheartening to know there will probably never be games like this again. FromSoft is rounding a serious corner off their most mainstream success to date with Elden Ring, and looking to push the boundaries of the Neo Souls formula to the limit with experimental titles like Night Rain. And I don't see them ever returning to this more methodical and subdued, cerebral sort of design. And while other studios have tried and will try to emulate their success, I don't know that what we have here in Old Souls can ever be recreated. Even when other developers make a decent Souls-like, there always seems to be something missing that keeps it from achieving a proper Old Souls vibe. And I think after Elden Ring, the interest in any Souls-like format outside of Neo Souls and Hyper Neo Souls will simply become far too niche and unprofitable, perhaps as it was always meant to be. Wistful of tears this may bring to mine eye, I don't intend to conclude on a bummer, so let me say this. These games go on sale fairly often, and I'm sure many of you already own them all if you're this deep in FromSoft YouTube. Consider this a sort of call to action. You don't have to play Elden Ring. These games are not yet dead. They may not be booming like the latest entry, but that persistent loneliness and genuine surprise at online interaction only bolsters that Old Souls vibe. These games are beautiful and strange, and the servers are still online, and there are still weirdos like me that are out here playing them frequently, appreciating the unique experiences they have to offer. So, why don't you join me? Strap on your thinking cap, make sure you're hydrated, read a bit of Marcus Aurelius, and boot up Dark Souls 2, or Demon Souls, or Bloodborne, or Dark Souls if you must, and appreciate the granddaddies of your funny L2 game while you still got the chance. That's pretty much it for today. I appreciate you sticking around, and do let me know what you think about this type of video. Do you enjoy the generational yap sessions that I provide you with? Do you prefer more simplistic or invasion-centered content? How do you feel about me covering games that aren't Elden Ring? Hit me up in the comments. I love seeing you guys engage with me here, and I love the conversations that I get to have with y'all. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Big Charles, and I'm gonna just let this invasion play you out. Peace.